Hello and welcome back to Hot and Bothered. You're listening to episode 3 in the series. In this episode, we'll be discussing the controversial HS2 infrastructure project here in England. We'll hear from the environmental activists about the details of the project and their reasons for opposing it. Whether you've never heard of HS2 before or you're just seeking more information, hopefully this episode will leave you feeling informed and inspired to take action. One of the activists that I spoke to over the phone was Larch. I spoke to him while he was in a tunnel underneath Houston Square Gardens in London, putting his life at risk in an effort to put an end to the project.
HS2 is going to get cancelled at some point because we're in a climate and ecological emergency and it makes no sense, it's got no business case. We're trying to bring that date forward when it gets cancelled, and we're also trying to then use the cancelling of HS2 to help really shift things around with the climate and ecological emergency so people really start to take appropriate action on it and treat it like an emergency before it's too late, because we risk societal collapse and the loss of everything we love if we don't act really soon. And that's like the science is so clear on that. So that's why we're here in tunnels under Houston Square Gardens, because it's the most effective thing we can do to address that wider climate and ecological emergency and bring about the system change that we need. The system that created these problems is the same system that created HS2. So we need to change all of that, and HS2 is our opportunity to bring about that change.
Talia Woodin joined me over Zoom to discuss the project. Talia is a youth climate justice activist who has been on the front line campaigning against HS2 for over 9 months. Hi Talia, thanks for joining me on the podcast. It's nice to finally sort of sit down and have a chat after so long being connected on social media.
Yeah, for sure.
So this podcast episode is all about HS2 and everything that surrounds that. And to kick us off, for any listeners who are maybe listening who aren't as clued up as someone like yourself on this, would you be able to explain a little bit about what the project is and what is HS2?
So it's an infrastructure project that the government is currently carrying out. And it is the second high-speed rail, that's what it stands for, HS2, well, high-speed 2. It's the second one that we have in this country, the first one being the Channel Tunnel train line. And it's a train line that's planned to be run between London and Birmingham for the first phase of it, and then potentially from Birmingham then up to Manchester and Leeds for the second phase. And then there's also there are plans to then push the line further up into Scotland, but those haven't been approved yet, so that isn't set to happen for sure, but potentially, yeah.
Yeah, and it's also been proposed as a bit of a north and south connection in England. But you've got a lot of people saying that is this actually just a big vanity project for Britain to have one of the leading fast rail networks?
Yeah. It's kind of being pushed through under the guise of kind of like sustainable development, and one of the government's attempts to kind of be pushing our our economy and everything towards more sustainable and low carbon options. And obviously like infrastructure and travel is a big part of that. And it was first proposed by the Labour government about a decade ago, and obviously has developed a lot since then. It's become a lot more expensive and unrealistic, but it's very much kind of the government's, as you said, vanity project to try and be top of the game when it comes to kind of sustainable low carbon infrastructure and development.
Yeah, and the high-speed aspect of this isn't necessarily the main pull for the project. It's also to, free up the lines for freight and commuter trains and increase capacity.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of questions in the air about that now, about whether this is a very expensive £100 billion gamble. As we've seen, since the pandemic, people working from home now and a lesser demand for people commuting into these big cities. So I suppose that's the question. Is this a big gamble or is it justified?
Yeah, I mean, even before the pandemic, in 2017, I think it was, when the Tory government kind of gave the final approval for the project to start. And obviously that was a few years before the COVID was even a kind of vague issue for us. And even before then, at that point, it was still hugely unrealistic and unnecessary as a project. The amount of money that's being put into it, and then when you look at how high-speed rail has kind of changed travel in other countries, like they have it obviously in like France and Italy and in South Korea and Japan, I think there have been studies that show that actually it doesn't reduce the amount of road and air traffic significantly enough to be worth the amount of time and money it costs in order to build it. And the other thing is that obviously you're looking at a already really not very significantly large distance, like London to Birmingham, it's only 2 or 3 hours. Even London up to Manchester or Leeds, it's not a long journey. You can do it pretty affordably within a few hours by train or by like road. I don't know many people that are currently flying between London and Birmingham, so trying to reduce the amount of air traffic is just ridiculous. And the other thing is that high-speed rail, obviously, like the technology is much more advanced, which means that using that service is going to be much more expensive. So it's not going to be affordable for the majority of people that are currently getting the train from London to Birmingham or London to Manchester or whatever. I mean, I think tickets at this point have averaged about £100 to £200 for a single to London to Birmingham, which is just not affordable. And this idea that it's trying to bring a boost in economy to the north and all of that, like it's just, you look at research that's been done on existing high-speed rail infrastructure in other countries, and all it shows is that it just brings more of the economy and more business to the larger cities that the line connects to, and that really what would benefit the north would be more connections east to west rather than just down to London, and more connections to the suburbs and smaller towns on the outskirts of larger cities. So even without COVID, even without how many people are now just not commuting anyway, it was really unnecessary.
Yeah, so that's phase one that we're talking about there, isn't it? So that's from London to Birmingham. And then to be completed after that is phase two, from Birmingham up to Manchester and to Leeds. And there's been questions raised around that as well, about whether the budget will actually be in place, or whether it might even get cancelled altogether, which again raises concerns about whether is this actually going to benefit the north in any way at all, or whether it's just going to, be a bit of a toy for the London commuters down south.
Well, exactly. And even just how the project's being like constructed physically, the fact that it's that phase one is the London to Birmingham route, which already has like really affordable and accessible, in the scheme of things, transport connections. Like if it really was about bringing a boost to the economy in the north, surely the line would start in the north and then come down to London rather than prioritizing the London part of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the sustainability of this project, because it's something they continually push forward, is how green it's going to be and how sustainable it's going to be for the future. They talk about the green corridor, and the plan there is to plant 7 million trees along the line when they build it, and create little ecosystems for the natural wildlife to create their own habitats, so they're not disrupting the nature too much. But does it all sound a little bit too good to be true? Why are so many climate activists up trees and protesting this like yourself? And what's anyone else outside the movement perhaps missing when they think about HS2?
So there's a few things. Firstly, infrastructure is one of the most polluting and highly like environmentally impactful like entities that we have, like just like building and infrastructure, and the amount of resources and materials needed in order to to build something like this just has a huge impact. And that is something that won't be carbon neutral for at least 100 years once the train line is built, just because of, even if you just look at the amount of aggregate and the amount of cement that is needed to build an infrastructure project of this size, the carbon that will be released because of that, and the impact of that and the footprint of that is just absolutely huge. And the fact that the Tory government is already setting goals of being carbon net zero by 2050, which is, as we know, hugely late. This project is not even fitting within the parameters of their already very late goals for being net zero. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that a big part of their kind of their public image and the greenwashing that they're doing, and their arguments for why it's not going to be like negatively impacting the environment or the climate, is because of obviously them replanting all these trees and creating all of these environments. But the thing is that the environments and the woodlands that they're destroying are ecosystems that have been around for hundreds of years. And what they're doing in order to make up for that is literally just planting a bunch of saplings, like completely, the completely unexperienced, like negligible planting. They're not really bringing ecologists in to do the work properly to make sure that they are planting these trees in a way that they will thrive and they will actually like contribute positively. There's been huge amounts of studies and articles written by the Woodland Trust that basically just shows that it's all just for the image. None of it is actually going to make much of an impact. And the fact that they think that they can actually replace these habitats and these ecosystems that have grown naturally and found like symbiotic ways of existing with so many species for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they're planning to replace them with a few thousand saplings. It's just ridiculous. And it's not like it doesn't work like that, you know?
It's a bit laughable.
Well, exactly. And we also know that, you know, carbon offsetting by planting trees only goes so far if you're not actually reducing the amount of carbon output in the first place. And the fact that this project is going to do the opposite of that, when it's being put it out as a sustainable option for infrastructure and for travel, the whole thing is just really ridiculous.
Activists recently dug a 100-foot tunnel underneath Euston Square Gardens in London to bring a halt to the development of the project. I spoke to Larch over the phone while he was underground in the tunnel. Hi there, Larch. This is Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Hi there, thanks for joining me. So just quickly, what's the situation like in the tunnel right now?
Situation is that they're still not in the tunnel. They've basically done a big down shaft by the side of our down shaft, and they are now extending that along to the side of one of the tunnels. So they're working right by us. Because we've got a line of ply, and I think they've got a line of ply between us. But it's like they're about 6 inches away from us.
Right.
Just the other side of some ply. So it's kind of an interesting situation.
Yeah, this is crazy. So for anyone who doesn't kind of know what's going on, what's the purpose of the tunnel that you've built down there?
So we built these tunnels under Euston Square Gardens because Euston Square Gardens are under threat from HS2. They've destroyed the other half of the gardens last year for a taxi rank, and now they want to move the taxi rank temporarily, as if for 17 years while they redo the Euston station, and to destroy the other half of the gardens. And then it's part of this land grab, which is the sort of one of the hidden agendas of HS2 is a massive land grab. More land is being taken like this that isn't actually the railway line itself, it's associated development. And so they would then sell off that. They would take public land, which is left for people in perpetuity, and privatise it, sell it off for office block and make millions of pounds. That's their sort of longer term plan. And so we're here to oppose that, protect the gardens, and also to help bring about the HS2 is going to get cancelled at some point because we're in a climate and ecological emergency and it makes no sense. It's got no business case. We're trying to bring that date forward when it gets cancelled, and we're also trying to then use the cancelling of HS2 to help really shift things around with the climate and ecological emergency, so people really start to take appropriate action on it and treat it like an emergency before it's too late, because we risk societal collapse and the loss of everything we love if we don't act really soon. And that's like, the science is so clear on that. So that's why we're here in tunnels under Euston Square Gardens, because it's the most effective thing we can do to address that wider climate and ecological emergency and bring about the system change that we need. The system that created these problems is the same system that created HS2. So we need to change all of that, and HS2 is our opportunity to bring about that change.
That's incredible. It's amazing that you've gone about that yourself and almost put yourself in that danger for this cause. Anyone who's listening who would like to get involved to support this resistance, what would you advise people do?
We need there's a few of us in this tunnel, but there are thousands that are behind us and supporting us in different ways, and everyone can play their role. So I would encourage people to dig tunnels if they're up for it. But there's quite a simple sort of thing to do. We can give people lots of tips on that. But you can also do anything you love to do. You can do it in support of this movement. People can write to their MP to get them to support the climate and ecological emergency bill, to cancel HS2 and to cancel this eviction. They can contact the health and safety executive to get them to actually do their job and make sure this is done in a safe way. They can support our fundraiser. They can, if you love to do art, you can do some art for it. We need help, with writers. We need whatever, literally every job there is going, whatever people love to do, you can do it to support this. Yeah. And you can do it from home, or you can come to the camps, or do it in your community.
And what are your sort of next steps now then? I've seen online and stuff that the conditions are not very good there at the moment. You've got mud seeping in. Is everyone okay down there? Have you got enough food, and how are you all sort of getting on?
Yeah, we're all getting on really well. It's really united and strong, and our spirits are really high. We're having a laugh every day. We have a laugh, and we're joking and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's really, really good. In many ways, we're having a great time. We've got plenty of food and water for the moment, at least. Bailiffs are refusing it, but again, we've got sort of people trying to pressure them to allow us food and water as part of our human rights. But the water coming in was because of HS2. I mean, we built safe tunnels here, and they've been going for months, and we've had safe tunnels in protests for decades in the UK, and no one's ever been hurt in them. But what they did was one of the first things they did when they came in was they took away our rainwater control. So we had a little system set up for catching the rainwater and taking it away from the tunnels. Wasn't it? But they've removed that, and they haven't reinstated as an efficient alternative. So that's why we're now getting more water coming down than we had before.
Yeah, it's a dangerous situation in some sense.
But it's backfired on them. These things always do. So they are currently kind of struggling with the fact that they've done this down shaft and they've done this parallel tunnel, which is a bit dangerous. They shouldn't really be doing it that way. But they've done that, and then there's lots of water in there, so they're actually unable to proceed until they can dry the walls and the soil out a bit. So they've put this massive fan to try and dry it out. But if they simply, had the rainwater harvesting that we had, it wouldn't have been a problem in the first place.
Yeah.
So they've created problems for themselves by making these basic mistakes and in risking our safety in the process.
I won't take up too much of your time because I know you haven't got much charging. Using your time wisely. But I just wanted to thank you for coming on and joining me on this podcast. And I just wish you all the best of luck. Hopefully everything goes to plan down there, and I hope more people get involved with the resistance of this project.
That's it. I really encourage everyone to get involved in whatever level. As I said, check out the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill Alliance. There's a website for that. Check out HS2 Rebellion and Stop HS2. There's websites for them as well.
That's brilliant. All right, thanks, Large. Thanks so much for coming on.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, best of luck. Stay safe. Activists like yourself have been on the front lines campaigning HS2 for months now. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about your personal experience and the camp that you were on just a couple of months back?
I mean, so going back a bit further than that to give some kind of context to the current campaign, obviously HS2 was first kind of put through like planning and everything about over a decade ago now. And throughout that decade, there has been a really incredible ongoing campaign led by local people in locations between London and Birmingham that will be hugely impacted by the building of HS2. So it's been hugely grassroots and very much led by the people on the front lines that are having their homes, their livelihoods, their communities destroyed by this project. And then, of course, in 2017, 2018, when the actual construction of the line started, some activists or just some members of the communities involved in it, involved in resisting it, decided to set up sites in areas that were going to be constructed on and land needed in order to build the line. So in order to physically disrupt that. So the sites have been going for about 3 years. Obviously, they started off around Harville Road, which is the area just in West London, near the Chilterns, where there's going to be a huge amount of destruction happening, already is a huge amount of destruction. And from then, sites grew and popped up in various different locations between London and Birmingham, and at different points we've had about 7 or 8 sites going. I've been and spent time at all of them, obviously some more than others. I've been on the campaign for about 9 months now and have spent most of that time living out on these sites. And the 2 that I've spent the most time at are Denham Protection Camp, which is in the Colne Valley near Harville Road, so just outside of London, and then Crackley Woods Protection Camp, which is just outside of Coventry, so the further north part of the line. So I spent the last 9 months or so kind of traveling between those places, and obviously within that there has been a lot of different kind of forms of activism. Obviously, just kind of being there and holding the space is in itself resisting this project, because we're occupying the land needed, and that's kind of why evictions then happen, because HS2 then has to bring in people to remove us from that land. And that's what's been happening at Euston for the past week, because they've been holding that garden since the summer, because it's going to be destroyed in order to create a temporary taxi rank. That's the other thing that a lot of people don't understand, is that the train line itself isn't the only thing that is part of this project. It's if anything, this project is, the train line is kind of a disguise in order for the government to then be able to roll out a major land grab. I think it's something like 0.7% of English land, and that like doesn't sound like a lot, but we're a very small island, and that is a large amount that the government is purchasing, basically. I mean, it's really something out of the kind of feudal system, it's ridiculous. And so a lot of the destruction that's happening isn't even solely to build the train line, it's in order to build infrastructure around that, or in order to build roads around that, or I don't know, in order to expand housing in small villages or something. It's basically just as you said, a vanity project.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really good that you mentioned that, because I think for onlookers maybe who aren't as engaged or involved in the movement as someone like yourself, they may look at the activists in Houston Square Gardens in London who are putting their lives at risk in these tunnels as being a bit dramatic for the sake of a taxi rank. But I suppose what you're saying and what the movement is trying to do is get the point across that this is about the bigger picture. And we really want to start conversations about this.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening who maybe wants to get involved but can't climb trees or dig a tunnel, for example, what kind of things can they be doing from their own homes on an individual scale to support this?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots, and that's one of the things that has been really, really uplifting to see over the last week or so that this eviction has been going on, that public support has really like shot up. Obviously HS2 Rebellion and Stop HS2 are the kind of the main two kind of campaigns that function alongside each other in resistance to HS2, and within that there's a lot of other individuals and groups that kind of don't necessarily identify as being part of those groups, but that are still part of this campaign. And they're very easy to find online, and it's very easy to find ways in which you can support them, whether that's by donating money or just by helping to spread the word about them, or whatever. What's been really great in the past couple of weeks actually is the amount of people that are starting to really publicly call out and call for like accountability and for action to be taken by HS2 itself, by the High Court Enforcement Group, which are responsible for the National Eviction Team who carry out these evictions, by the Health and Safety Executive, by the Department of Transport, and the amount of people that are putting pressure on these both public and private bodies in order to get them to take responsibility for what they're doing. And that's really important actually, because at the end of the day this is a publicly funded project, and we have had so little say in it, and it is something that will impact all of us and that we are being forced to be complicit in because it's being paid for through our taxes. And so the very least that we can do is publicly denounce it and make those governing bodies and those companies aware that we do not support what they're doing.
Yeah, so like you say there, with the public not having a proper vote on this, with a budget so high, is 106 billion plus they're planning to spend on this. And when we've seen in recent weeks that we can't even put decent food on kids' tables when they're hungry, I think the priorities are a little bit off there, and there are a lot of questions that need to be had.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Talia. It's been really great to have you on the podcast. I hope everything goes well in your campaigning, and I look forward to chatting with you soon.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good.
So there we have it. I hope that's given you a little bit more information on HS2. If you've got any questions or you thought that we missed anything there, leave a comment on the YouTube video or get in touch via social media. Thank you to both Talia and Larch for joining me remotely to make this episode possible. You can follow Talia on Instagram with the handle @TalTakingPics, and follow @HS2 Rebellion for more information and to stay up to date with all of the campaigning work that's going on at the front lines. You can also follow us on social media with the handle @DriveDocs. Keep an eye out for the next episode where I'll be speaking to activists about the future of the workplace as we move out of the lockdown.
Well, first and foremost, I think, when you say going back to the offices, I think that's the first thing that's going to change because, what does an office really mean? Does it have to look like an office building with a little small cubicle desk and, your colleague right opposite of you? No, it doesn't necessarily need to.
This is a podcast for DriveDocs and was hosted and stitched together by me, Chris Healey. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.